Welcome to NEXTGames Omen series. This video covering the solo of Kaillou. Now in this video I'll give an overview of the Kaillou battle strategy and give a battle example of the fight against Kaillou. We'll do all of this on the ninja job with the warrior sub job. Now Kaillou is a monk with the warrior, white mage, and black mage sub jobs. As with all the Katuri NMs, I recommend using your full Malignant set to help resist the majority of the spells and abilities thrown at you. Use the accessory slots from your normal TP set to make sure you can still self-skill chain reliably, and be sure to cap your subtle blow. Now with Merits and Turnian Dagger, you will be only 9 away, so either have your Urine up or a Churich +1 ring to make sure that you are capped. Next, let's talk about Kaillou's special abilities. The first, and easiest to deal with, is the 100 Fist ability. He normally uses this around 75% hit points, and I recommend using a Seek and focusing on recasting shadows as soon as they get low, and not waiting till they run out, so that you don't get hit with one of his nasty end spell abilities. Now the next thing we need to talk about is his melee hits and those end spell abilities. They have an added effect of Paralyze, Petrify, Curse, and Silence. This means you really don't want to get hit, as it may immediately prevent you from being able to put up shadows if one of these effects occur. I recommend recasting shadows at 2 to prevent being hit with a melee attack. Now the most challenging mechanic with Kaillou is Unfaltering Bravado. This is a conal ability that will do 10,000 damage spread evenly among the targets that it hits. This damage cannot be reduced or eliminated through Megawari, so this ability is the main challenge in this fight. Kaillou uses this ability at 4 different stages: 75%, 50%, 25%, and 10%. Now to survive this mechanic, you need to make sure that you group your trust around you. If you can get all 5 right next to you, it will hit each for about 1,666 damage. If he hits only 4 of you, then it will hit each of you for 2,000 damage. So you need to make sure that all of the trust have more hit points than this at the time that Bravado is cast in order for them to live through it. This makes trust selection key to this fight. Now I suggest Ulmia and Joachim for marches. I double up on them just in case one of the 2 dies. Arcelia for haste 2, and because she has high hit point total. And Monborough and Yoran Oran for cures. Now to help these trusts survive the Unfaltering Bravado, you have many options. The first is to use a Marine Stew Pot that will boost your entire party's hit points. The second is to use the Adamantoise Cheer effect to boost your trust hit points by 10%. And the third is to wait for one of the several trust campaigns per year where trusts get a hit point and magic point boost. Now with the trust that I list, the only one that should be in danger of dying from this ability is Yoran Oran. Therefore, you have 2 choices. The first is to let him run around and stay away from the others so that it only hits the 4 trust and yourself, doing 2,000 damage to each of you. This leaves all of you at critical hit point levels, but takes Yoran Oran out of danger. Now the second option that you have is to keep trying to reposition until Yoran Oran decides to group up with the rest of your trust, putting all 5 of them right next to each other. This leaves everyone with more hit point when Bravado is used, but leaves Yoran much more vulnerable to being able to be taken out during this fight. I go ahead and most commonly choose the first option, but both options are viable, and it may come down to the fact that you use the first option most commonly if the event is going on, i.e. when your trust have the most hit points, and that second option will probably become most useful when the trust event is not going on and they have that reduced amount of hit points. Now there is also risk in a big spell or ability going off right before Unfaltering Bravado, and leaving everyone at low hit points right before he uses it. So what you want to do is time things carefully and make sure you let him TP and use a spell at 76%, 51%, 26%, and 11% hit points, and then weapon skill or skill chain to force him to use it when he has low TP and has just casted a spell. Then you want to immediately recast your shadows, as they will be down after Bravado is used, and return to your furthest spot from the trust to put them in the safest range possible. Then continue the fight. Also note that under 25% hit points is the riskiest time when fighting this NM. That's when Interference, Malign Invocation, and Meteor will all be used frequently. If any of these are used in quick succession back to back, it can lead to Trust dying and then eventually a wipe. The last 25% is where all of the risk is in this fight. Make sure you get to Kaillou with as much time as possible, as it allows you to easily recover from a near wipe. Note that if one of the Trusts dies, you are still okay and can deal with the next Unfaltering Bravado as long as it hits the remaining 5 people that are alive. Now, after 10% hit points can get quite messy, and if you're going to start losing trust, this is often where it occurs. However, if you're fast, you can take out Kaillou before all of your trusts are taken out. Note that even if they are taken out, there is time to recover in this fight, even if you die here and still win this. If you do happen to die, make sure you have re-raise up and immediately get back up once he reaches the center of the ring. Then recast re-raise, use Majin Gaokri, and die away from him. Then get up again, and get Trust out and get back to work. If you do all this quickly enough, he will normally only regain about 50% of his hit points, which should only take about 10 minutes to get through. Now this isn't normally needed, but making sure you're ready to do this brings a success rate of these runs from about 50% up to 75% for me, so it's a good thing to still have in your tool chest. Also note that I have noticed my usual go-to of a Hishi with Turnian +1 wasn't getting me good enough results here. My damage output went up substantially on this one when I swapped in a Kannagi with a Turnian +1 instead, so I recommend that you do the same. I wanted to make sure this example video showed many of the things that I talk about in these Omen boss videos. Therefore, look for these different examples I give in this one video. First, I will start with the Kendatsuba +1 gear and use it for the first 50%. Compare how hard things hit in regards to his spells and such, and how easily shadows are kept up here, and then compare that to the last 50% to give you an idea of how much the Malignant set helps. I also start with the Hishi here to show you its damage output for the first 25%, and then I switch to my recommended Kannagi to show you the damage change there as well. Now everything goes great until 9% in this particular video, when the Trust don't cure themselves fast enough after one of the abilities, and the second ability takes them out. This is the riskiest part of this fight that I mention, and that can happen under 10%. I do my best to recover from this, but sadly I die at 1% remaining. However, I use the method I mentioned previously to hop up and re-engage and get the win. This is only necessary about 25% of the time, but I felt it was important to show in my example video exactly how it is you accomplish this. As long as you do not let him regen to 100%, he will not use Unfaltering Bravado at the levels he has already done it before in that particular fight. I also go ahead and make sure that Yoran Oran is out of range, just to show you how much of the damage your Trust can take, even when there's only 4 of them helping you. And I also am not using the Adamantoise Cheer effect yet, so that would be another 10% hit points that would help me out here. I'm also not using a Marine Stew Pot in this example, which is another 90 hit points. So even though the event is going on during this example, between removing Yoran Oran, not having the cheer up, and not having the food up, I'm pretty much reducing the hit points by a substantial amount just to kind of show you how versatile this solution can be. Normally, I'd recommend having that cheer effect and Marine Stew Pot on, and I would have even an easier time than what you're seeing in this battle example. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this fight. And that will be it for the Kaillou Omen strategy video. I hope you found that helpful. The next video I'm going to cover will be Fu, and we'll show you how to solo him next week. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.